by diving right on into it and seeing how these players decide to lead, how they decide to maneuver their strategy as soon as they get into the game. And obviously, these games are really quite high stakes. There's a lot going on for them, and we are going to see a number of those Pokemon that are well known for Trick Room already in the leads as well.
Oh yeah, we're already seeing those leads hit the field, and for David Carrere, we do see that there is that Dusclops as well as that Glastrier on the field, which is going to really be able to set up for the Trick Room here. But I feel like David actually ended up being really forward in their thinking, bringing out that Amoonguss right away to be able to take advantage of that Trick Room.
Amoonguss has always been a Pokemon that loves playing in the Trick Room, and in previous formats, it's been around just to stop it there. I like what it can do here, though, being able to take something out of the game with Spore. I mean, basically, David's lead here is very much supportive and able to try and control the flow of the game a little better than many other leads. Its whole goal here is to disrupt exactly what Davide is trying to do and really go from there.
Yeah, well, look at that. The Dusclops is actually going to be leaving the field, and I feel like this is actually really important to note about a Pokemon like Glastrier, is that it doesn't necessarily need the Trick Room in order to thrive here. So you do see the Tapu Fini coming in to reset the terrain, but Amoonguss does go for the Protect there, so we aren't going to see any status effects come out from them.
I think that's very wise, playing it safe. You're in front of a Glastrier, obviously, and as you mentioned, doesn't need the Trick Room. Can be pretty terrifying with the amount of damage it can put down. The Icicle Crash heading towards the Protect. Most importantly, though, the Dusclops left the field, and that, would have been a focal point setting up the Trick Room, but the Tapu Fini came in, which means that ever-present Spore play is going to be ruled out for any Pokemon that are grounded. I like what the Grimmsnarl did, very kind of defensive, setting up David for something a little bit later in the game by saying, you know what? I'm just going to be able to put up the Reflect now. We know that obviously Grimmsnarl can bring the double screens, as it's known, with the light screen as well. So even if a Trick Room goes up, and even if, Davide tries to get himself in a advantageous position with the speed, from a kind of defensive perspective, it could be really easy for David to try and withstand that and maybe work through all 5 turns without losing too many, if any, Pokemon.
Yeah, that's a really great way to kind of set up for success for this match, but Tapu Fini is going to be leaving the field once again after being able to set that terrain, and it's Dusclops back on the field. But another switch is taking place now, as we were able to see in that preview before, and it's going to be that Indeedee hitting the field, resetting the terrain, so this could be a potential Spore situation.
I like that. I like when players have to play around the terrain and really force themselves to think, and bringing in that Indeedee, being able to control the terrain yourself when you are relying on the Amoonguss and its Spore. Very, very wise, and even better, he's managed to call it there and land a Spore as soon as the Dusclops switched in, so this prominent Trick Room user not able to Trick Room for at least a little bit of this game.
Well, that's the other thing, though, about bringing the Indeedee on David's side, is that Indeedee gets access to Trick Room, too. So there is still the slower option available, and the opportunity to potentially just reverse the Trick Room.
Reversing Trick Room is one of my favorite ways to stop a Trick Room, actually. Just being able to reverse it and keep control of it. But when you need it and you need to set it up for yourself, it's an option too. So it's really, really potent when well executed. Obviously, we've not had any actual damage go down yet in this match. And I think that's interesting that both players here are really jockeying for a position and maybe an opening that they're able to really capitalize on. Just a lot of switching, a lot of maneuvering the board state here and going from there. So both trainers thinking about how they want to get an advantage before they start trying to deal damage. And I think what's quite interesting here is to see Davide immediately throwing out a Dynamax as well.
Oh yeah, finding that perfect opportunity now, recognizing that maybe this Amoonguss is going to be a pretty big threat here, but also there's a bunch of supportive Pokemon on David's side of the field that would love to be knocked out here. Amoonguss, though, does go for Protect, so David is playing it very, very safe, as we are going to see this Glastrier go for that Max Hailstorm now, and it's into the Grimmsnarl here, so really nice call.
Getting damage down with your, Dynamax turns is important, and that's something we talk about a lot when we look at these highly competitive matches. Not falling for the Protect there, getting the damage down, setting up the Hail as well for a little bit of chip damage. You never know when that's going to come in handy. Could really work in Davide's favor. I like what he's done here by just saying, well, Dusclops is going to stay on the field and work through its sleep turns. That's fine. But more importantly, I'm going to apply so much pressure with this Dynamax. The Amoonguss is probably going to be forced to leave or play it very, very safe at least. That might be a way he's trying to carve out that advantage. And obviously these trainers, well experienced with their teams now. We're in winners round 6, really know their way around some of the tougher matchups. And this Glastrier, the Max Hailstorm, is going to apply a whole lot of pressure. And if he can force some switches into Pokemon that David doesn't want to give up and doesn't want to get damage down on, then he could find himself in a really advantageous position if he even sets up the Trick Room later.
Oh yeah, I mean, you could already see from the Pokemon that's sitting in the back for David, it is that Rotom Wash, which is going to be the primary damage dealer for the team. So keeping that Rotom safe is going to be really, really important here, but David's feeling the pressure. It is going to be switching out into the Rotom here, as we're going to see another switch on the field once again. That Tapu Fini coming back and resetting the terrain once again.
Got to control that terrain, and maybe trying to think that something like the Indeedee was coming in, then it'd have to contest with Psychic terrain, but also, quite importantly, making sure the Rotom Wash comes in and doesn't actually have to deal as much with some of the big damage that this Glastrier can deal. Obviously, it takes Max Hailstorms a little bit better than Amoonguss, as we might be able to witness here. I said a little bit better, still quite a good amount of damage going down there.
Yeah, that was a lot of damage, and plus, you're going to have that chip damage coming in from the Hailstorm, and boy, I feel like this Glastrier is really making the most of its Dynamax turns.
It has to, and that's really important for it. I mean, it's got one more remaining. We could see another Max Hailstorm from it, or maybe it's going to dive into its kind of slightly wider move pool and try and mix things up. But of course, none of them have been knockouts yet. They've just been good bits of damage, so it's not the most optimal Dynamax, but if it sets him up for later, that's going to be very, very important. So David, really limited in the amount of damage he's been able to put back, as to that Spirit Break in the last turn from Grimmsnarl was one of the first bits of damage we saw heading toward Davide's side of the field, and landing into a Tapu Fini isn't exactly where you want it. So certainly slow and steady for both of these players, but as it comes to getting damage down and starting to wear down your opponent a little bit, Davide does have a slight advantage in that regard.
But the other thing you have to consider is the fact that David is making incredibly defensive switches here to stall out these turns of Dynamax, and still has Dynamax in their own back pocket to be able to use later on in the game. And we're still seeing more switches come through here. Amoonguss coming back in for the Rotom, does not want to be able to take another attack into that slot, and we do see that Sleeping Dusclops come back out onto the field.
Coming in the place of a Darkest Lariat as well. So a nice call there by David Partington to make sure he starts getting damage down. As there it is. It's going to be a kind of dive into the deeper move pool of Glastrier there. A not very effective Max Knuckle, though, is not how you want to end your Dynamax turns.
No, but the most important part about that is that Glastrier, now out of Dynamax, does have that impressive boost. Not able to proc the Chilling Neigh ability yet.
I know, not being able to get that is really big for slowing down the momentum of a Glastrier, and that's been really, really big for a lot of people playing and experimenting with it already, that once they get the boost, it's able to keep on going. Getting damage down towards that Dusclops is big. Obviously, that's something that David Partington's a little bit scared of, wants to make sure it's asleep or hopefully knocked out before it wakes up, and then he can go from there. So this game has been a really, really good mind game between both the players, just trying to suss out exactly where their opportunities are to find that huge advantage and swing the game in their favor.
Right, it's been such a back and forth though that it really doesn't feel like the favor is in any one of these players' hands just yet. We're kind of waiting for that big swing turn to happen, as the Dusclops is going to be removed from the field once again in the face of that Amoonguss. Tapu Fini comes back out, and it's all about seeing some more defense come out from David. Very, very slow style of play here, but Darkest Lariat comes out now into the Tapu Fini. Doesn't do very much though, because it's not very effective.
Yeah, David basically saying, I can't give up my Dusclops. I know you've got Darkest Lariat, and I'm not going to let you land another one on me. So the Tapu Fini switching very wise there, and of course comes with the control of the terrain, which has been really, really big. The Grimmsnarl, though, finally felled, is taken out by the hail, so not the most kind of optimal option there, but it's at least a knockout. We finally get to see something removed from play in this game.
But this is such a scary position for David to be in, because while you're probably looking at Rotom as maybe the Pokemon that you'd really want to give that Dynamax factor to, it's already sitting at half health. So are you really going to be able to make the most of its Dynamax turns I know it's holding on to that citrus berry, so you do have a chance to regenerate some health there, but still a very scary position for a Pokemon that you'd really like to be able to dish out big damage with.
The Rotom, I think, is the key focal point when it comes to damage from David's side of the field, and as you mentioned, it's in a very treacherous position. It doesn't want to take a big hit because it might just get knocked out before it gets to even use its citrus berry. So for Dynamax candidates, it's really the only one. We have, of course, seen in the past Amoongus's Dynamax. We've seen pretty much anything Dynamax at this point. But in this position, it really does come down to the Rotom being able to do good work. This Tapu Fini's been essential. It would do very nicely if it could land a Max Lightning into the Tapu Fini. But I really don't see a concise answer to this Glastrier right now, apart from just switching around and kind of keeping that going. But your switching options are limited when you've already lost a Pokemon, so Davide kind of starting to put the pressure on here. As slow as it is, he's started to wear things down with that hail damage, with those Dynamax turns, and I think David is going to need to respond to that quickly.
Absolutely. I mean, Glastrier just puts on a ton of pressure. We already talked about its huge attack stat and just being able to dish out big damage. And plus, with the max knuckle boost that it was able to get, it's going to be able to dish out quite a bit on David's side of the field. But we're seeing Tapu Fini leave the field, and it is Dusclops coming back in its place, which is already asleep and needs to wake up sometime soon.
It's been on the field for a number of turns, actually, while being asleep, so it should be in a position that maybe can start to wake up and get its Trick Room set up, or maybe keep going. It is going to take a lot of damage, but not quite enough to knock it out. On the turn, the hail stops too, so this Dusclops just clinging on, still drawing attention to itself.
Yeah, it has at least been able to do a great job of soaking up damage for David's side of the field, keeping Glastrier very safe, and also taking that Spore away from Tapu Fini was huge. Now Tapu Fini can come back in, and Glastrier doesn't have to really be phased in the face of this Amoonguss, considering the fact that Tapu Fini can reset the terrain and make sure that Spore doesn't happen.
It's key to keep Spore off the field, particularly when Glastrier is the focal point of this team. I mean, we've only seen 3 Pokemon from it, but it seems very apparent that Glastrier is what Davide is playing around and what he's very focused on winning the game with. So he's got to keep it safe. It's only taken a minimal amount of damage, which is really good too. And there it is. Dusclops leaves the field once again, and Tapu Fini comes back. So if there's a Spore, it could be a problem.
Yeah, that's for sure. But Tapu Fini's Misty Surge is going to be something to keep Glastrier very, very safe on the field. But what I think is important here is that we're seeing David go for the Dynamax, finally. We recognize that Rotom might not be in a great position to actually take advantage of the Dynamax factor, but here comes Indeedee.
That's another one for the bingo card. I know we've talked about it before, but I don't think I've seen a Dynamax Indeedee yet. Be curious to see how much damage it can actually output with something like the Max Mindstorm. We'll see the attempt here, and Tapu Fini is going to be the recipient of that one. Does get control of the terrain again. That's really, really nice. That's something that's obviously very, very important. And Tapu Fini manages to hold on through the Max Mindstorm.
Oh, but the change in terrain. As Amoonguss goes for the Spore, that's the perfect opportunity for David to just click that button and put Glastrier to sleep.
Yeah, that's exactly what he needed. Was he didn't have the time, and something that both players have been doing early on was switching in and out to get control of the terrain with the Surge abilities. But being able to use the Dynamax and of course those max moves to change that terrain and get that control really, really big. And David's probably feeling pretty good about his position right now. The Amoonguss isn't threatened by the Glastrier because it's asleep, and he's able to kind of play the game the way he wants to. So we'll see how much damage comes out in these next turns, and if there's an easy way to remove Glastrier from the field as well, alongside maybe tidying up that Tapu Fini, getting that last bit of damage down on it, maybe catching that Dusclops on the way in and easily removing that from play. I think David's, particularly while the Glastrier is asleep, is in a very, very good position.
Yeah, absolutely. This has been 2 Pokemon now that David has been able to put to sleep in the Dusclops as well as the Glastrier. And that's a lot of David's game plan, just kind of eliminated from the field. So while that Glastrier is asleep, you may as well try to dish out as much damage onto it as possible. And that's going to be a lot. We are going to see the Tapu Fini, though, fire back with a Moonblast. It's not super effective, so you're not going to see too much damage come through. But that special attack drop might just matter here as the Sludge Bomb goes into the Tapu Fini. But there wasn't nearly enough health for this Tapu Fini to hold on.
No, even the special attack drop isn't going to save anything from those sludge bombs. That said, Glastrier wakes up immediately as well, so is going to get the chance to Icicle Crash as soon as it wakes up, and that Amoonguss is removed from the field, so a very, very short sleep there, basically a nap for the Glastrier is going to cause a lot of problems for David's strategy to see out this game.
A power nap. Who doesn't love a good old power nap? And Glastrier is definitely feeling the benefit of that one, as well as getting that chilling neigh, just to be able to increase its attack once again. So now that Glastrier is sitting at a +2 attack boost, and it's Urshifu in the back here for David to be able to kind of seal up this game, it kind of feels like.
This is a very kind of offensive pairing to have in the back, right? Is Glastrier and Urshifu. You've got something that's fast and deals damage and can play through Protect, which is obviously a huge bonus for it, along with the ever-present Glastrier, which if it lands attacks is going to be doing some really big damage. Rotom easily removed from play, as we talked about earlier. Its health just wasn't enough to be hanging around for too long, and indeed he's going to be forced to fire back, but we know what it's going to be facing down in the next turn.
Yeah, so this is a position I don't think David really wanted to be able to see themselves in, but it is going to be Urshifu and Indeedee here.
Urshifu versus Indeedee is not the matchups you want to see. That's not quite where you want to be if you're the Indeedee, especially on the turn that your Dynamax ends as well. You can't really play around it all that much and go from there, so it should be interesting to see how much it can fire back, but you've got to land a lot of attacks before you get caught by one singular Wicked Blow.
Well, it's going to be the Wicked Blow that moves first here from the Urshifu, and we'll see exactly how much damage that's going to do. Indeedee, almost knocked out there, but able to hold on because of its Focus Sash. So we'll be able to fire off one more attack, but something tells me this Mystical Fire is not going to be enough to be able to seal this game for David.
Not a chance, no. Mystical Fire is not going to be able to do it, and even worse, the Dusclops finally wakes up. Tries to Nightshade, doesn't get to do it, of course, because of the typing. But it is awake, and it could do something in the next couple of turns. That said, it doesn't really matter. Urshifu is going to be able to wrap this game up for David, and what was a very long, drawn-out game finally falls his way. Both players trying to find that advantage, and in the end, a short sleep for Glastrier.
Well, let's get into that game number 2, shall we? And see whether or not David's able to bring in a little bit more power to the team. But we will see a little bit of a switch up here already. That Urshifu not going to be preserved for the back this time. It's coming out as a lead here alongside that Regieleki here for David. And David now going to be bringing out Grimmsnarl and Amoonguss. Very passive lead, lots of setup included for this turn for David.
Regieleki's a Pokemon I'm interested to see more players use. I think it's been talked about a lot because obviously it's super high speed, but it brings a very different option to that slower and a more thought out option. It's very much looking to go first, looking to deal damage and disrupt your opponent's team that way. So the Grimmsnarl's gonna maybe have to set something up to try and help out there. The light screen would be grand, but the Regieleki really able to start carving open an advantage really early on, and I'd be curious to see how Davide adapts to a different game plan. And I really like teams and particularly players who can adapt and just play the game so differently between games 1, 2, and 3 in a set.
Oh, absolutely. Well, we're already seeing a huge switch up here. You can see that David was going for a very hyper-offensive lead with that Urshifu as well as that Regieleki. And lo and behold, it is going to be that Regieleki that gets that Dynamax factor and is going to be able to dish out some big electric-type damage.
We'll see exactly how much it is with the Max Lightning heading towards Grimmsnarl, and yeah, knocking it out. That is why people play Regieleki. It moves first and it knocks stuff out.
Yes. Oh, it is so fast. It's one of the fastest Pokemon in the format. So even Pokemon that have like a Choice Scarf attached to them, it's going to be faster than even some of those types of Pokemon. And wow, that's a lot of damage onto Amoonguss too. This is not looking good.
That's a huge amount of damage down onto Amoonguss. Obviously, Wicked Blow and the critical hits guaranteed are nice, but we didn't get anything set up there from the Grimmsnarl, and that really limits what Grimmsnarl's doing in these games, right? Where it's not able to set up for its team and play around that. Maybe trying to work in something like the Spirit Break and get that damage down there. But you can't do that in the face of Regieleki. Regieleki will go first, Regieleki will take those knockouts. That Amoonguss taking huge damage too makes it very scary. Rotom coming in could be slightly problematic here.
Yes, I think that Rotom is also set into a position where it's going to be able to do a lot of damage, and especially at full health, makes it a great Dynamax target for David's side of the field. I think what's really interesting is kind of what this Amoonguss is going to try to do here. Spore isn't necessarily an option anymore, so maybe you just have to go for some damage.
Well, this is Davide kind of showing off his control of the terrain, right? Like we talked about it in game number 1, how important it was around the spores and such. But he's said, you know what, you did it with Max Mindstorm. I'm going to do it with Max Lightning. And just make sure you can't put my stuff to sleep. You know, Max Lightning is going to be in a very good position to set that terrain and deal huge damage, which is probably the best value max move you can use. Rotom's going to be kind of interestingly placed. Just because it is the Dynamax focus of this team. But Amoonguss's Rage Powder could help it out a lot here.
Well, that Rage Powder is going to be able to take this Max Lightning from Regieleki, but because Amoonguss isn't sitting at too much health, that is going to be a knockout secured, which means that whatever Urshifu decides to do here, I think Rotom's going to be taking a lot of damage.
Yeah, Rotom is going to get hurt by this Urshifu. It's not a knockout, and it's not really in range of knockouts or anything, but it is still a lot of damage going down, and that's something that you want to be cautious of. There is the potential for the Max Lightning to land next turn into that slot, and you know, the combination of Max Lightning Wicked Blow would easily knock out this Rotom. Indeedee will get to come in and control the terrain for a little bit, which is kind of nice, but there's only so long that can last for when there's a Pokemon with Max Lightning on the field.
Right, that is going to be Regieleki able to kind of reset that terrain, and because David is down to his last 2 Pokemon, it means that no more switches can happen here. So how are you supposed to reset the terrain for yourself, especially when you're taking a look at a move like Expanding Force on terrain, able to hit both opponents?
There's no more switches between Pokemon in the back and in the front. We could have some Ally Switch. I thought we'd just point that out while it's there. Maybe try and keep this Rotom around for as long as possible. Looks like this Rotom is a little bit concerned about being in a little bit of trouble. Did contemplate the Max Guard there, which I think is probably a little wasteful at this opportunity. You need to start making up these advantages, and the only way you're going to make up that advantage is by throwing out something like a max move every single turn. So Indeedee is going to try and keep Davide guessing here.
Oh yeah, well, the Max Lightning is going to go into the Rotom, though. It was going after the Indeedee, and that's going to be a huge knockout for David.
This game has really took a turn. You can't Ally Switch and then not get anything out of the turn, right? And Davide either calling it or just being more scared of the Indeedee anyway, and what it could potentially do is something like Expanding Force. Really, really wise there. This Regieleki has landed 3 of its max moves, and it's taken 3 knockouts. That really is the best value Dynamax turns you can have, and that's exactly why these teams with very oppressive and offensive options to lead can find these advantages and can find these wins very, very easily. Of course, it's the end of Dynamax for Regieleki, but it's done more than its fair share, as Urshifu's just stood there, just Wicked Blowing some stuff, maybe trying to catch some knockouts that way, or bring down, Pokemon when it needs to.
Yeah, well, Rising Voltage now coming out from Regieleki is going to deal that one last bit of HP damage to Indeedee. So David is going to walk away with this match in a 2-0 versus David Partington.